Have you ever left a conversation feeling defeated? Not because you were wrong, but because your truth fell on deaf ears? Have you felt that tight knot in your throat, the frustration of being unheard, while louder voices claim the room? In a world that prizes noise, reaction, and dominance, silence is often mistaken for weakness. But what if silence isn't surrender? What if silence is your greatest weapon? In our fast-paced, hyper-verbal world, the one who speaks less is often perceived as lacking. We're raised to believe that assertiveness means verbal aggression, that victory is defined by the last word spoken. We celebrate the loud, the bold, the outspoken. But Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most provocative and misunderstood thinkers in history, saw something most never dare to acknowledge. The loudest are rarely the strongest. He proposed a radically different truth, one that turns everything we've learned upside down. Silence, far from being an absence, is often the purest form of power. Nietzsche didn't speak for the majority. He spoke for the few who feel drained after every interaction where they were forced to explain their soul, the ones who walk away from noisy conversations feeling smaller, dimmer, quieter inside. He wrote for those who see the futility of constantly reacting, constantly trying to be understood by people who aren't even listening. In a society addicted to opinions, reactions, and justification, Nietzsche whispered a revolutionary idea. True strength is calm. True dominance is quiet. The greatest impact is often made without uttering a word. This video is for the ones who are tired of explaining themselves. For those who've been overlooked, mocked, or ignored, who walk away with the feeling of being erased. Let's rediscover silence. Let's weaponize it. Let's take a Nietzschean path to mental and emotional mastery. The illusion of words. Why do we always feel the urge to respond, to correct, to win? Why do we believe that the louder or faster we speak, the more value our words hold? Because we've been trained, from childhood, to equate silence with submission and reaction with power. But Nietzsche flipped this narrative on its head. He understood that those who are desperate to explain themselves are not defending truth. They are defending ego. They seek validation, not clarity. They fear rejection more than they desire authenticity. For Nietzsche, most debates and conversations are not the noble pursuit of truth we idealize them to be. They are battles of ego, camouflaged as discussions. Beneath the words lies an anxious need to dominate, to be right, to be affirmed. Argumentation becomes an armor for the fragile ego, a way to protect the illusion of self. But here's the catch. The moment you feel compelled to justify yourself, you've lost. You've handed your power to the other. You are no longer acting, you are reacting. You're playing their game, not living by your rules. This is what Nietzsche called herd morality. It's the collective mindset that prizes obedience, agreement, and being perceived as morally correct. It's the system that tells you to avoid conflict, to seek validation, to be the agreeable one. But in doing so, you sacrifice yourself. You water yourself down to be digestible for others. And in that act, your strength fades. True power, Nietzsche believed, lies in the refusal to engage on those terms. Silence in this context is not retreat. It is rebellion. It is the quiet but unwavering refusal to bend to a system that thrives on emotional chaos. When you withhold your response, your validation, your emotional energy, you regain control. You exit the herd. You step onto a higher plane of self-mastery. And that, Nietzsche would say, is where your power truly begins. The observing mind. Nietzsche warned us about the dangers of being reactive. He saw reaction not as strength, but as enslavement to external forces. The reactive individual is a puppet, strings pulled by others' expectations, emotions, and provocations. To react is to give someone else the power to direct your inner state. But to observe, to remain still amidst the storm, is to rise above the noise and reclaim your agency. The observing mind does not rush to respond. It listens, but it listens with depth and discernment. It watches patterns, weighs intentions, and sees through illusions. It is not moved by provocation, because it understands that most aggression is projection. When people speak with anger or dominance, they are often revealing their own wounds, not attacking yours. The observer sees this and does not internalize it. Nietzsche believed that the highest human being is one who is capable of detachment without losing intensity. That is, someone who can feel deeply, think clearly, and still choose not to react. This does not mean indifference, it means mastery, the ability to pause, to reflect, to decide consciously, not compulsively. In the modern world, this is a rare skill. Most people are ruled by impulse. They respond instantly to comments, tweets, arguments, insults. They seek quick victories in conversations, unaware that their constant reactions are evidence of internal instability. But the observing mind is different. It chooses stillness over noise. It selects presence over performance. This chapter of Nietzsche's wisdom invites us to stop performing and start perceiving. To realize that silence does not mean absence, it means presence. It means you're aware, conscious, grounded. It means you're watching the game, not being played by it. And in that space between stimulus and response, in that sacred pause, is where true power resides. The language of silence. If silence is not absence, then what is it? Nietzsche would argue that silence is a form of language, but not one that seeks to convince. Instead, it imposes. It radiates presence without relying on speech. In the modern world, where everyone is speaking over each other, the one who chooses silence wields an unsettling power. Their stillness isn't empty, it's intentional. Their lack of response does not stem from ignorance or weakness, but from a deeper awareness that not all battles deserve their energy. Silence in this sense becomes an act of supreme discipline. It communicates boundaries without confrontation, resistance without escalation, and wisdom without performance. Nietzsche viewed this as one of the highest forms of power, the ability to remain unmoved, undisturbed, even when provoked. Because the one who has mastered himself has nothing to prove. He has transcended the childish need to always respond, always be heard, always defend. The silence of the Übermensch, the higher man, is not the silence of fear, but the silence of mastery. He speaks only when necessary, and when he does, his words carry the weight of his restraint. People feel it. They sense that his words were earned by long reflection, by inner struggle, by conscious choice. And that makes those few words unforgettable. But more often than not, he doesn't need to speak at all. His silence alone is enough to shift the dynamic in the room. It makes others uncomfortable, uncertain. Why isn't he reacting? What is he thinking? Is he judging me? That discomfort is a mirror, and people project their own insecurities onto it. The loudest voices grow louder, more desperate, and the silent figure, unmoved, becomes the gravitational center of the moment. This is the true language of silence. It doesn't explain, it exposes. It reveals the weaknesses in others by not trying to cover your own. It lets them unravel, not because you forced them to, but because you didn't play their game. Nietzsche saw this as the power of detachment married with presence. A paradoxical state where you are fully aware, fully engaged, and yet not ruled by the need to intervene. In a world obsessed with asserting identity and demanding validation, silence is rebellion. It is the refusal to place your value in the hands of others. It is the quiet, unshakable knowing that your power does not need to be proven. It only needs to be lived. When wielded wisely, silence speaks louder than any argument. It does not plead. It commands. Silence as psychological warfare. To understand the real potency of silence, we must step beyond philosophy and into the battlefield of the human mind. Why does silence have such a profound impact on others? Why can it break the composure of even the most aggressive personalities? Because silence is not just the absence of sound. It is a trigger, a psychological weapon that forces others to confront themselves in ways that words never could. Silence disrupts. It breaks the rhythm of expected interaction. Most people are not looking for truth when they speak. They are looking for affirmation, for a return volley, for a mirror to their own image. When they don't receive that, the loop collapses. Their brain enters uncertainty, and in uncertainty, fear thrives. Studies in psychology have shown that silence during confrontation is often perceived as judgment. Even when you are simply listening, your lack of response activates insecurities in the other. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, fires off signals. The person begins to wonder, what are they thinking? Are they judging me? Did I make a mistake? Their composure begins to unravel. Their narrative begins to crack. Nietzsche, long before neuroscience could confirm it, understood this reaction. He knew that humans are fundamentally uncomfortable with inner silence, let alone silence imposed from the outside. The average person lives in a perpetual stream of thought and noise, using speech to mask vulnerability and doubt. So when they encounter a presence that does not respond, does not react, they panic. Not because they are under attack, but because they cannot see what lies behind the calm exterior. This is why silence is devastating to manipulators. Those who rely on emotional games, guilt-tripping, gaslighting, they need your reaction to stay in control. Your silence breaks their mechanism. It takes away their ability to pivot off your emotions. Without your feedback, their structure collapses. They start over-explaining. They become erratic. They reveal what they tried so hard to hide. But silence goes deeper still. It doesn't just disrupt others, it exposes hidden wounds. It brings unresolved traumas to the surface. People often react not to your silence, but to the silence they carry within. Their fear of abandonment, their fear of not being seen, their fear of being insignificant. And you, by simply saying nothing, become the mirror reflecting those buried fears back at them. Nietzsche's vision of the silent, self-contained man was not cold indifference, it was spiritual discipline. He knew that silence creates space, and in that space, truth reveals itself, not through force, but through the unraveling of illusion. The loudest are often the most fragile, and the most silent. They are the ones who have already won the war within. To master silence is to understand human nature, to see the invisible strings that govern behavior, and to cut them, quietly, cleanly, without the need for applause. The 4 weapons of silence. By now we've established that silence is not weakness. It is power in its purest, most distilled form. But how can we transform that understanding into a practical weapon? Nietzsche didn't just theorize about silence. He lived it as an art, a discipline. To master this art, you must understand how to wield silence deliberately, surgically, and with strategic intent. Here are the 4 weapons of silence, and how they can empower you in everyday life. 1. The withheld reaction. This is your first and most essential tool, the decision not to respond. When someone insults you, questions your values, or tries to provoke you, your silence becomes your armor. The moment you react, you step into their arena. You validate their attack with your attention. But when you remain silent, you take their weapon and render it useless. The power of this silence lies not in passivity, but in presence. You are not retreating. You are refusing to surrender your composure. Nietzsche knew that the strongest individuals are those who do not allow others to dictate the pace of their emotional world. The withheld reaction says, "You do not control me." And that statement, made without words, is terrifying to those who seek power through manipulation. It neutralizes them. It leaves them speaking into a void, confused and powerless. The world expects you to react, and when you don't, it's as if you've rewritten the rules entirely. Second observation, over-engagement. In silence, you listen, not as someone waiting to talk, but as someone studying the terrain. You gather data, you perceive contradictions, you detect the emotional tones behind the words. Most people speak with hidden motives, insecurity, desire for approval, fear. When you listen as an observer, you become a strategist. You no longer speak reactively but intentionally, using their own behavior as a map. Nietzsche believed in the clarity that comes from observation without interference. In doing so, you become less predictable and far more powerful. You create a mental edge, a position of quiet advantage, and that advantage can be maintained indefinitely. While others expose their weaknesses through words, you gather insight without giving anything away. You become the unseen player controlling the board. 3. The prolonged pause. Never underestimate the pause. The well-placed silence is not only unsettling, it's commanding. When you delay a response, it generates tension. That tension makes the other person reveal more than they intend. They fill the space with nervous talk, excuses, or emotional leakage. Meanwhile, you remain poised. The longer you wait, the more your presence grows. This is a form of psychological gravity. People are drawn into your silence, not knowing what lies behind it. You no longer chase approval, you make others chase clarity. Nietzsche would argue that this is the moment when power silently changes hands. The pause is not simply the absence of reply. It is the assertion of dominance without noise. It makes people question themselves, revise their stance, and often surrender more than they intended. 4. Unpredictable stillness. The final weapon is unpredictability. When your silence is deliberate and varied, people can't categorize you. Are you angry? Are you calm? Are you calculating? The fact that they don't know gives you immense leverage. Predictability is the enemy of power. The one who can be read easily can be manipulated easily. When you become the silent mystery in a room full of noise, you force others to play defense. You invert the dynamic. They second-guess themselves. They measure every word. Your silence becomes the controlling rhythm of the conversation. It introduces a discomfort that sharpens awareness. People feel they are being watched, evaluated, even if you remain still. This heightens your influence. Nietzsche recognized that power is not always in the hand that strikes, but in the hand that refuses to. And in a world addicted to expression, the one who withholds expression becomes the exception, the one others cannot ignore. Together, these 4 weapons form a complete arsenal. They are not tools of avoidance, they are tools of dominance. Nietzsche's silent strength wasn't born from fear of speech, but from mastery of when not to speak. This is the silence that shifts power. This is the silence that reshapes the room. And when deployed with wisdom, this silence doesn't just protect you, it transforms you into the most formidable presence in any situation. The trap of passive silence. There's a kind of silence that empowers, but there's also a kind of silence that imprisons. Not all stillness is strength, and not all quiet is wisdom. Nietzsche warned us. What many call peace is simply the absence of courage. It's not the silence of power, it's the silence of surrender. This kind of silence, the passive, paralyzing one, is the refuge of the domesticated soul. It's the silence we learn in childhood, when speaking our truth brought punishment or rejection. It's the silence we adopt in workplaces, in relationships, in society, when conformity is safer than expression. It's not the noble silence of the master, but the conditioned silence of the obedient. Nietzsche saw this clearly in his critique of slave morality, the system of values created by the weak to endure the strong. In such systems, virtues like humility, patience, and self-denial are praised, not because they are inherently good, but because they protect the powerless. In this worldview, silence becomes a survival tactic, not a sign of mastery. And over time, we forget the difference. Think of how often you've remained silent, not out of strategy, but out of fear. How many times have you let someone interrupt, belittle, or dominate you, and swallowed your reaction because you didn't want to create conflict? That silence might feel virtuous on the surface, but inside it corrodes. It signals to others that your boundaries can be crossed. It invites exploitation. Worse still, this passive silence becomes internalized. You stop just silencing your voice. You start silencing your needs, your instincts, your identity. You become invisible, not as a show of strength, but as a habit of survival. And that, Nietzsche would argue, is a betrayal of the self. To remain silent in the face of manipulation or abuse is not discipline, it is complicity. Nietzsche did not write for the agreeable, the submissive, the perpetually nice. He wrote for those willing to rupture the status quo, to risk being misunderstood, to claim their presence with force even if that force is quiet. The challenge then is to learn the difference between empowering silence and disempowering silence. One is rooted in intention, the other in fear. One is a pause before striking, the other a retreat from the battle altogether. If your silence is making you smaller, it's time to break it. If your silence protects peace but sacrifices your dignity, it's not peace, it's passivity. Nietzsche's ideal is not the man who never speaks, but the man who chooses when to speak, and never bows when he does. This chapter is a call to reclaim your voice, not always in volume, but in presence. It's a reminder that silence must come from strength, never from submission. Because when you confuse the two, you don't just lose the argument, you lose yourself. Becoming the Übermensch. Nietzsche's most iconic and misunderstood concept is that of the Übermensch, the overman, the higher type of human being. He is not a superhero, nor a tyrant. He is a master of himself. And perhaps more than anything else, he is the living embodiment of disciplined silence. He speaks only when he must, and when he does, the world listens. Becoming the Übermensch is not about power over others. It is about rising above the need to be approved by them. It is about transcending the psychological chains of guilt, fear, and herd morality. It is about becoming your own law, your own standard, your own voice, even when that voice chooses to remain silent. To walk this path, you must detach from the constant pull of external judgment. The Übermensch is not swayed by the praise or criticism of the crowd. He sees both as attempts to control him. His focus is internal, his values, his mission, his truth. In this sense, silence is not avoidance. It is an assertion of sovereignty. It is the refusal to waste energy on the opinions of those who have not mastered themselves. You must stop waiting for permission to exist. Nietzsche asks us to shatter the illusions that keep us small, the illusion that we must be understood, liked, or accepted to matter. The Übermensch is not concerned with being relatable. He is concerned with being real. That authenticity is not loud. It is immovable. This kind of silence demands immense inner strength. It's not easy to remain quiet when you're being attacked, misinterpreted, or dismissed. But the Übermensch knows that responding in desperation is surrender. He has trained himself to endure misunderstanding without needing to correct it, because his truth does not depend on others recognizing it. In this silence, there is a deep and unshakable dignity. It is not arrogance, it is clarity. When you no longer fear being misunderstood, you are free. You do not chase alignment, you embody it. You are no longer a performer in someone else's narrative. You become the author of your own. To become the Übermensch is to cultivate presence that does not beg for attention. It is to wield silence not as retreat, but as declaration. Your stillness becomes a symbol, not of passivity, but of profound mastery. While others are trapped in reaction, you are anchored in awareness. While others seek to be heard, you speak only when your words carry the weight of truth. Nietzsche envisioned the Übermensch as the one who has risen above the chaos of modern life. Not someone who escapes it, but someone who shapes it with every silent step. He is the storm's eye, calm, centered, and powerful beyond measure. So how do you begin? You start by resisting the urge to explain yourself. You start by recognizing the spaces where your silence has been fear, and reclaiming them as strength. You build the muscle of restraint. You choose presence over performance, and you learn to walk alone when needed. Becoming the Übermensch is not about perfection. It is about direction. It is about aligning with your highest potential and walking with the quiet confidence that comes from having nothing to prove. You no longer scream for space. You embody it. This is the essence of Nietzsche's vision. Not a louder man, but a deeper one. Not a conqueror of nations, but of self. And when you become that, your silence is no longer silence. It is a signal to the world that the one who matters has already arrived. Speak less, become more. In a world obsessed with opinions, noise, and validation, the one who masters silence becomes unforgettable. Nietzsche didn't invite us to mute ourselves. He urged us to speak with intention, to live from the inside out, and to resist the pressure of conformity. The true mark of strength is not in how often you speak, but in how rarely you need to. Silence is not the opposite of power. It is its purest expression. It means you do not need to prove, please, or persuade. You are not at the mercy of others' expectations. You carry yourself with quiet certainty, and in that certainty, others feel something ancient and undeniable. Presence. Let your silence become your signature. Let it guard your energy, expose the truth in others, and remind you of your sovereignty. Speak only when your words carry the full weight of your being. And when you do speak, speak with the clarity of someone who knows who they are. Now, if this message resonated with you, if you're ready to cultivate this kind of unshakable strength, then stay with us on this journey. On this channel, Tiptop Tidbits, we explore timeless wisdom from philosophy, psychology, and personal mastery to help you rise above the noise and live deliberately. Subscribe now to Tiptop Tidbits and become part of a movement dedicated to inner power, deep thinking, and meaningful change. The next video will take you even deeper. Don't miss it, because in the end, those who speak the least often leave the greatest echo.